I know. And thank you very much for coming. Particularly Professor Hood, who is teacher of Professor Singh, and Hood is also my ustad in some sense. He has intoxicated me with the taste of Malay. He was responsible for sending me here because of my interest in Orang Asli, and it made it possible for me to keep on continuing reading up about Malay and the Orang Asli communities, and subsequently also try to learn something about the ethnic issues of these islands. When I was told about this university, Professor Singh took me around to see the impressive place. In some sense, it's a wonderful place, and I had to quickly think how to make my talk a little more adjusted or fine-tuned to perhaps the interest here. Of course, there's human ecology, but there are also people interested in the environment, wetland, and development, and community relationship to plants and things. We have lots of plants here, which it's very pleasant to be in a campus like that. What I want to talk today about is, or rather show, and then open up the session, for any kind of question and understanding and clarification, is that, in the previous talk which I was giving, which I had given 2 years back, I had introduced this issue of the schooling we had started with the JARAWA community, also known as ANDAMAN. In the school itself, and some background to the school will help you to understand why the film which I am going to show you. The JARAWAs as a community, if you can just have the next slide to show you the map. We are sitting in Kuala Lumpur. It is about 849 miles away from the town or the administrative seat of Port Blair in the Andaman Islands. Give you some idea. The next map, please. Andaman Islands is a series of islands. The JARAWAs, the community I'm going to talk about, resides in the middle and the north chunks of that land. On your left-hand side, that's the coast, not facing the insular Southeast Asia, but facing the other side of the Southeast Asia. On these islands, the JARAWA community came out, as they say in the administrative terms, from being hostile and isolated. They came into contact with the outside world, or more regularized contact, in 1999 and year 2000. Till that point, it was very difficult even to go inside. Perhaps some of the Orang Aslis were like that at some stage, and now of course things have changed. But for the JARAWAs, it is a very recent thing that they have come out and had contact. And then, like any other school or any other government's welfare policy, they wanted to start a school. And the standard thing which they had done with some of the other tribal groups on these islands residing in other islands, they're classically referred to as the Negrito groups, and administratively regarded as particularly vulnerable tribal groups, was that there would be a central government's school curriculum, and there will be a school where the teacher never goes, the children never go because they can't relate to the word pea, which is depicted in their textbook with a fruit pineapple. It doesn't grow in their forest. So these are the kind of problems of education. So some of the kids who have got education, class 10 or something, they end up in being in some menial job, of being some peon in some office. And they lose a kind of dignity of labor, or people say, oh, you got a job because you are a tribal, you just do this, as long as you get your salary, we have done our job in welfare. So we wanted to create, my colleague Dr. Mujumdar, who is here, she's a historian, and actually she's the one who propelled me to start thinking about school as a constructive and an important way by which something anthropologist and historian, she being a historian, could contribute to the real development of the community. So the idea was that we should have a homegrown school. Some of you may be aware of Deschooling Society by Ivan Illich and the critique of school system. So how do we do that? If we could have the next slide. That's okay, just shut it off. So the idea was to create a school in consultation with the elders of the community, who suggested that we want kids who would hunt the pigs and the turtles in the forest, but would also be, no, we don't need to go to this, you can shut it off. Thank you. Who can hunt in the forest as well as gather resources from the forest, but if required, they should go to the city to collect medicine. So they have this idea that the children must be bicultural. They must be able to move in between the two worlds, but not forget their own tradition. Now, to me, that was a very important political message, that it must be incorporated into the curriculum, that they should be able to operate in two worlds, the world of the forest and the world not of forest. Because if they operate in the forest, they will be able to protect that forest. For you people, it may be something which may sound a good song, but it's not very easy to do that, because the experience all over the world is that the indigenous communities are very vulnerable. That's why the government calls them PPTGs, who would easily give up or could be pushed over to give up the forest. And the forest goes, the ecology goes, and what's the use of it, you know? And of course, the outside world sees the Jarawas as somebody who is jungly, a term which perhaps is also used in the colonial records in Malay Peninsula. That, you know, they're jungles, they are not proper chaps, you know. So we wanted to create a curriculum which would teach them to be in the forest as well as teach them about the outside world. How do we do that? The biggest growing problem over the generations has been, since coming into contact with the outside world, that the younger kids don't want to do what their grandfathers did, don't want to learn the physics of how the bow and arrow works, don't want to know about the botany of growing tubers and how to harvest the tubers so that it's a sustainable resource in the forest. You know, how to not kill all the animals at the same time, but have an economy of maintaining the species diversity within their own worldview. So these are some of the issues. So we created what we call as bicultural and bilingual educational curriculum. So they learn their own language is also reinforced by the elders teaching it. And since the language doesn't have a script, we adopted the Hindi script, which is the script which the outside world writes and talks in. So they can read, they can learn about certain kind of literacy, numerical literacy. The community doesn't count more than 3. But they should not be cheated by somebody. You know, that you give me 5 kilos of crabs which I have collected in the forest, but I give you money only worth about, say, 5 ringgits or something. So how they should not be cheated? How they should have an idea of weight? You know, what is the market? What is, you know, these are very important issues. So through school we wanted to also politicize and create. So we gave them this slogan that your language is your pride and your forest is your strength. And to do that, we created 3 curriculum books, you know, 3 textbooks which they keep learning, and the school is run in different parts of the forest, wherever they are, because these are constantly moving tribal and hunting and gathering groups. We created the school text based on the season. So there are 3 seasons. Seasons to work around the sea, season to work in the forest to hunt pigs, and season to collect honey, which is an important part of the diet of the whole world and the resource collection. But along with these 3 things are also certain principles and traditions and technologies and sciences from their point of view, what I call as extra-sciences. For instance, to start hunting the pig, 2 months before that they have to start making their bows and arrows and repair it. Now, what kind of plant will provide the cord? That means certain kind of botanical sense. What kind of wood has to be bent, how much to make the arrow? That means a certain kind of physics to understand the thing. So in that sense, a book was created, one of the books which you will see here today, was created about the honey. Now honey implies botanically what plants provide the best honey, to identify those plants. How do you identify where the beehive is? You know, you must have certain sense of the plants and the other insects. The honeybees are identified through birds. So there is a not only connection in between entomology of the behavior of lapis, not lapis, I think the honeybee is called. Yeah, but the honey culture is, there's a word for it. Apiculture. So you need to know apiculture, but to know where the honey is, you must know the ornithology, because certain birds depend on it, and they are the ones who guide the person to the honeycomb. So in some sense, the textbook was not just honey. Textbook was also to keep alive their science of birds, their science of insects, their science of botany. So we created this 3-4 texts, and I want to show you the film which is based on the honey collection and how the elders in the community teach the younger kids about the honey. And this film becomes a part of the school Angata project, whereby they constantly are seeing this. So we are giving back the thing so that the tradition is not lost. And the film also has certain commentary about the outside world which is coming to the first. So I will not tell you all the exciting parts of the film, or what I regard as exciting parts. It's not a thriller. Some of you may find it quite a drag. But I think I like the green forest, very much like I like your campus, which has so many green trees. So could we have the film, please?
From the Jarawa community of Middle Andaman have moved deep into the jungle in search of a treasure they prize above all else. Recalling the learning passed down the generations, they pause often to scan the tree line for clues. Today, few children from the camp have come with them. They observe and learn as the elder Jarawas search for honey, or as they call it, digging. With this simple act, they keep alive their traditions, passing on their knowledge to a new generation in the face of increasing pressure from the outside world. Home to some of the world's most culturally unique human groups. Amongst them, the Jarawas live along the western forests of the Andaman Islands. In accordance with the traditional seasonal cycle, Jarawas within the 560 square kilometers forest reserve have various scattered campsites. While the forests are protected by law, the Jarawas are aware of how the world outside is slowly coming closer and closer. While historically they were never isolated, the Jarawas have actively resisted contact with outsiders till as recently as a few decades back. Today, they are in touch through a mix of supervised contact with trained government social workers and through informal interaction with settlers, whose settlements push against the forest boundaries. As cool January gives way to warmer March, the season of Bertajuk flows into the season of Todalahi. This is the prime honey collecting time, and the forest explodes in a frenzy of activity. The Jarawa call this Unihuru, which means searching for something in a special manner. Wild jungle flowers, big and small, bloom in abundance. Some, like the Mia Lopotang, is especially important. This flower, which is often used as body ornamentation, provides the nectar that produces the sweetest honey. And it is in search of this honey that our small party moves effortlessly through the forest. Glancing occasionally at the canopy, they look for signs of insect-eating birds like bee-eaters and drones. Suddenly, a drone, whose fluttering is an indicator of the path taken by bees as they move to the hive. It can only mean one thing: the hive is near. But the search for honey began many months earlier. It began with the making of the uhu, a special container in which the honey is extracted and kept. Carved from the trunks of the dard tree, each uhu takes weeks to make and finish. Using a jata, the inside is scooped out carefully and sculpted into a delicate container. The uhu is one of the few objects that both men and women work on together. Back in the jungle, more clues. Bertajuk, or bee droppings on the leaves, are an indication of the hive being close by. Children watch avidly while the elders point it out to them. Back at the camp, carefully, with infinite patience, one stroke at a time, the inside of the uhu is painted with a delicate pattern, like that of a honeycomb. The JARAWAs believe that the honey kept inside the painted uhu still thinks it is in the honeycomb and therefore retains its freshness. The outside of the uhu is painstakingly woven with shoots of orchid strings, usually by women. Weaving makes the uhu stronger, but is also a work of beauty and art. Things are getting serious for Ativedam and his team. While the youngsters look on, he carefully crushes the leaves and branches of the uwe plant and applies it to his body. Leaf extracts and never smoke are used to repel the bees. The JARAWAs worry that smoke will kill the bees, whereas the smell from the leaves only dazes them. This is seen as mangling, tricking, and not destroying the providers of their food. All through the forest, honey collection is in full swing. In another part of the forest, they sprays uwe leaf extract into the hive, disorienting the bees and driving them away. Having had the food, the remaining honey is packed in the uhu. Along the way, the group stops at the freshwater stream for a bath. This traditional practice cools the body, which is necessary after drinking pure honey. With the uhu filling up with honey, the campsite is decorated with yellow bark of wild orchid stems and tender palm leaves. This is a sign welcoming the invited guests, especially son-in-laws of the area, who come and feast on honey and stay for a few days at their wife's home. Satiated for the moment, the excess honey is sealed in the uhu and stored for later. In recent years, Jarawas have gathered various plastic containers. But honey must be kept in a wooden uhu. They say that the wood allows the gas to escape, thus preserving it. But change is in the air. Bokal, the eldest Jarawa lady alive today, can sense it, and she is not happy at the ceremonial celebration of the honey season. A few months back, her old husband left her for a relatively younger bride, and she blames her ex-husband's changed behavior to the changing times that has impacted not just their marriage, but also the forest and other Jarawas' image. Bokal's lament reflects a cruel reality. Every day, the world outside inches closer, tightening the noose around the Jarawa Reserve Territory, home to 528 Jarawa individuals. Decimated trunks of ancient trees litter the side of the road, while vehicles speed towards the forest's edge. While historically never isolated, Jarawas and the other tribal communities of the island face unprecedented and continuous contact today. Many of these contacts are illegal and transactional in nature and are detrimental to the community's well-being. The Jarawas themselves are sensitive to the negative impact of the outside world. The road has brought in a bee farm on the outskirts of the forest. The Jarawas are particularly concerned that the outsider bees will destroy the forest bees, much like the settlers who have tried to dominate over them. Yet, they are pragmatic about their changing world. The community members, in conversation with anthropologists and officials, convey their desire that their children and grandchildren should know about the ways of the outside world, yet never forget how to live in the jungle. These concerns led to the creation of the Young Education Program and syllabus in consultation with the community. For this to be a success, the Jarawa traditional knowledge has been systematically organized and transmitted in a manner that would not be eroded by the outside world. Young Jarawa children learn about these traditional knowledge, that of the forest, the birds and the flowers, the stories and the tales about the bees and honey. By illustrating honey collection as a classroom exercise, they remember and relive their connection to their forest home and leave behind a record of their memories. Traditional and intangible knowledge is taught by elder Jarawas to the young children. This bicultural and bilingual syllabus empowers and enables the Jarawa to interact with the outsiders on their own terms and at the time of their choosing. Away from the road, in the quiet of the forest, life is as it has been since time immemorial. Artula and Tapiata, back from the school, have taken their bow and arrows to hunt lizards, to practice what will become essential skills for survival. They will grow up like a new generation of Jarawas, proud of their heritage and culture, comfortable in their forest home, yet confident about facing the world outside on their own terms. The world perhaps heal the forest, so flowers can grow back and the bees can have their fill, so that the season of the lehe will remains abundant and bountiful.
Thank you very much to Professor Vishwajit for inspiring documentation and fieldwork. Basically, what you have given us is how to document traditional indigenous knowledge, which has been a difficulty to some Varanasi as well here because of the pressure from modernities and modernization has taken a lot of challenge to this indigenous tribe. I would like to invite all the guests and colleagues who want to share their concerns on this topic. You can introduce your name and basically briefly ask the questions so that Professor can give his view on the questions. Please. Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. My name is Mohammed Baratan, PhD student, Politics and Government. Let me first thank the professor for his wonderful job and for bringing us this knowledge of the JARAWAs. Someone like me, I've never thought a community exists in India like the JARAWAs. Now my question is, the JARAWAs are Indians nationally and Asians continentally, but they are Africans in terms of color. Is there any historical antecedent, historical causation, historical development that such species of people are found in an area that is predominantly not black? Was there any historical development, like maybe slave trade or movements as a result of wars or famine, etc., etc.? That's my first question. The next question is, I can see that the JARAWAs within their ecology, their location, have discovered the use of iron and discovered the use of fire. Was there a kind of level of technological development from the artifacts or the handicrafts that was shown in the video clip. And these people are said to have lost contact with the outside world. So, is that an aspect of indigenous technological development, or was those knowledge infused on them? Thank you very much, Prof.
Okay. You have raised complex questions. They are not just two questions. But I'll try to simplify the responses and we can perhaps go further. The issue of why the JARAWA seem to be visually exception to the general assumption about the subcontinent of South Asia. Well, I think a lot of orang asli look very identical to my JARAWA friends. Then the other way to patch up the thing is to say that nowadays in modern genetics, there is this idea of what used to be called earlier on as out of Africa thesis. So genetically, yes, there may be connections to the black, what they used to call in previous times, I hate the word, the black stock, in the genetic terms. But there's no other reason why, and also in central India, not just the island of Andamans, there are people who look very different. India visually is a very diverse country. In fact, if I was allowed to make some generalization, in this room there are some people who appear to be Indians, by what you would call as pigments, the color. But they may be Malay, So culture overrides some of these notions, I think in these parts of Southeast Asia, at least, and South Asia, which does not have the standard perception and politics as you have of, say, in continent of America, that there are whites and there are blacks and there are Hispanics and there are Orientals, So, in that sense, why not start with the presumption that we are all the same? Why worry about it and why be concerned? Oh my God, he looks very different from us. Point is, he and I, we are the same. There's a fundamental, that is what our discipline of anthropology tries to say, that we appreciate the diversity, but do not try to impose that everything is different. But they also look for similarities and differences and similarities. That makes us better human beings. Coming to the point of fire and metal, which you raised, by correctly got you. There are mythical ideas about fire, which they still have. But over last 20 years of being in contact with the outside world, if you today ask the kids, how do you light up a fire if you don't have a matchbox? How did your grandfather do it? They've forgotten it. In 10 years or 15 odd years, they've forgotten. You might have seen these people having a cell phone. That cell phone is a dummy cell phone, which is thrown away by the tourists from the bus, because it doesn't work. Or they gathered it from their villages who say, oh, I'll give you a dummy cell phone, which is dead. You give me a basket full of crabs. So, the cultural innovation and the capacity to incorporate things is very rapid. You are seeing people who have been in contact with the outside world in the last 15 years or 15 odd years. Quickly they have changed. They have t-shirts which have Chinese calligraphy on it. They have half pants. They have silk watches, which are not working because the battery is gone and somebody has tossed it. It's a cheap $5 Chinese watch which they buy in some junk shop. So, but they think that it's very powerful to have it. I insisted that, why don't you remove it when we go out to make this film? They said, no, we want to project that I am very sophisticated. I am like you. Now, to me, that's a very important message and intellectual thought to carry, that I should not expect them to be like JARAWA. The JARAWA doesn't expect to be like that, then why should I? But that is also the reason why I'm making these films and running it in the classroom, after every season. There are films which are being made on the pig hunting, there are films which are being made on the tuber collection, so that they see the film as a text to read. In today's post-modernist world, we always say reading a film, a narrative to be read in the film. But we are using the film as a textbook, as a history book, so that it's a mirror that holds them. And there are a series of these things. So every school, we are giving them a small laptop. You might have seen itself, I am showing them this film itself when it was made to the kids, and how excited they get about it. I think my collaborator has something to add.
Since I was also associated with the project, I just wanted to say something. In fact, we had this long discussion in another context as far as iron, etc. are concerned. That, when we say that these people were not in contact, they were not, it's not entirely true, because we forget the history of colonization of these islands. The British came in from the 18th century onwards. And there was this, and they made arrowheads with other stuff, and Vishwajit knows that better, but iron was something that they got from the colonizers. As far as their coming to these islands, there are lots of speculation. 30,000 years ago, 40,000 years ago, all travelers' accounts sort of say, but nobody has been really able to establish whether they came via the sort of human migration routes. The British earlier sort of thought that they were Oriental Negroes, Negritos, as the Orang Asli. So there are these multiple theories which are not very clear. So yes, they were isolated in the sense that they may not have voluntarily entered into human contact, but there was contact which was imposed on them by the colonizers. When there were shipwrecks, for example, they collected iron from there. They started learning and flaking and shaping the iron. So this is a much later 18th century kind of, or late 18th century, 19th century phenomenon which is there. And they adapt very, very quickly. So I think that the iron is a huge demand for them anywhere. As far as fire is concerned, Vishwajit is correct that they can't remember. They don't know how, they don't know when.
They have mythical stories about how to make it. Also, if I may be permitted to add something to what Dr. is saying, nobody says today that the Orang Asli and the Orang Andamanese may be related, but I believe they are. If you see the material culture, those of you who have seen Orang Asli in the real context will find a lot of similarities. The use of leaves for decoration, the container for honey. But most importantly, Jarawas described a creature in the forest which their ancestors had told them, which fits the description of what you find in Malay forest as tapi. Now it is not seen there. They say that our great ancestors have described it. So I took books of images of tropical plants, tropical animals, tropical butterflies, and showed the thing. And they said, yeah, that's what our. They said that this is the kind of animal our ancestors described, that it was partly black and partly white. So the cosmologies, the way you visualize the world, and how you think that, and how that affects the practice of it, is I think which is very identical. I always tell my students that every human being needs to eat. To eat is human. Some people use chopsticks, some people use cutlery, some people use fingers. But everybody has to take food to their mouth. But if you take your mouth to the food, then you are not human. So there is a similarity in differences and differences in similarities. Anyway, I don't know if that answers the thing.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Professor Ravisan.
Thank you, sir, for introducing something new. My name is Ravi. I come from UKM, which is, I think, the university that we are going to go to in the afternoon. I teach international relations, former bureaucrat, now turned academic. I have, of course, when we talk about, when I heard that you are from the Andaman, I was really excited because the Andaman, which I know was actually the Navy. You have a Navy base in Andaman, and we call it the Andaman Nicobar Command.
Yes.
And in Southeast Asia, we were actually quite worried when India wanted to name that command as a Southeast Asia Command at one time. Then India decided to name it as Andaman Nicobar Command and not as Southeast Asia Command. That's another twist to the story. Now my question to you is, I'm actually quite interested in So when I got the invitation from Brother Sarjit, so what I did was actually I started watching some of the videos of the JARAWAs and all that, and got a lot of information and trying to understand and all that. So I have two questions here. Number one is, I just wanted to know, there is always, when we talk about development and sustainability, there is always the nexus about the moral dilemma in development. Moral dilemma in development, if you look at it, is essentially to look at whether a particular community is entitled for development, the sense of entitlement. Is it right for us to keep them in their native scenario or environment, and we do, with limited contact, and we try to preserve them, but in actual fact that they are not longer in the mainstream of the society? I think this has been also, my friends who are working on the Orang Aslis have also been working on this. And if you look at the Orang Aslis in Malaysia, they have also very much integrated with the society. I think they are Orang Asli professors, Orang Asli doctors, there are schools. I remember when I started my career as a school teacher in the remote areas of Pahang, and I interacted with a lot of these Orang Aslis who goes to Orang Asli schools near Kuala Sentul and things like that, and that area, but it's quite a remote area. But of course, they have these education issues among the Orang Aslis. That's my first question to you, which is actually, is there a serious attempt to integrate, or rather, what is the discourse in India with regard to these communities? Okay, that's number one. Number two, I would like to know also about, does these JARAWAs have a social system or a structure? Like, for example, living in a community, is there any delegation of work or any kind of that structure? That's number one. That's the second question, part one. The part two is actually, do they have a faith system?
Do they have
a faith system, meaning which a belief system, right? And so these are the two questions. Thank you so much.
Okay. I forget the order in which you raised the questions. India has general policy for tribes within the mainland of the subcontinent, which is thought to be also practiced here, and we have tried to change that through this organization of country and being involved with the government as a critique of the government. That's what one does as a action anthropologist, in the memory of Soltex, by one old teacher, passed a long time back. The government's understanding is derived from an anthropologist, very relevant, who influenced the Prime Minister, first Prime Minister Nehru, and Nehru's critique of what the anthropologist had to say. The debate in between the two creates two models for India's development vis-a-vis to the tribal communities. One is that they should be mainstream. We should give them all facilities, education and everything, which we decide is correct, right? It is not asking the tribe that would you like to have noodles or would you like to have soup? We have decided you must drink powdered milk, so that's what you will have. That's one model, which creates this idea that they should become part of the mainstream. Pull them out of their isolation, pull them out of their quote-unquote primitivity, and make them like every other regular citizen. But what has happened in reality is that you treat them as Indian, but you don't give them Indian rights. Recently, we had election, and we had a bad result of that election. Worst thing which has happened to India is the recent election, and the Prime Minister got recently appointed, or he took his oath before yesterday. But they had opened election polling booths at the fringe of the forest, not in this particular area, but in some of the other ANDAMAN. But no, the tribe doesn't know that I am a citizen. I have a right to vote. The tribe is not aware of their rights, which the Constitution says that all Indians are supposed to have. The Constitution of India also says they have a right to culture. Each community, each individual has a right to culture. But that is never invoked. It's Article 23 of the Constitution. So this idea of mainstreaming is very questionable. You know, who's mainstream? Who defines that mainstream? The flip side or the other polemic is that you keep them isolated, which is the kind of issue you raised, you know, that ethically, can you keep this development away from them? So either the development destroys them or you don't develop them, let them survive and die on their own terms. My stand as an individual anthropologist or through this eclipse of education and project is that we must prepare and empower the communities to decide their own course of action. We must ask them, would you like to be mainstreamed and to what degree? As opposed to saying that you will mainstream or we will not mainstream, you keep ahead back, you know, because they are articulating. When you say, when you raise the question of belief system, that old lady who has lost her first husband has a very strong belief system that the forest has got bad because my personal relationship has gone bad, you know. It's very much like us saying, my work condition is not good, so I have mental tension and I need to go and see a psychiatrist. So beliefs are always there. There's no society which doesn't have belief. Not having a belief system also is a belief. And then there was the issue you raised about social systems. They have a very social system. Instead of going into great details of in anthropological terms, the whole community is divided into two basic moieties, turtle hunters and versus pig hunters. And each moiety has septs in it, and each sept has a cluster of families. And each family is supposed to have an exogamous relationship with the next sept. So there is an intercept marriages which happen. Just like in South Asia, you have inter-quota marriages which used to happen. They are partly matrilineal in the sense that, I shouldn't say matrilineal, they are matrifocal. So the daughter brings the husband to live inside, much like Tamil Nayars or something like that. I think some of the traditional Malay families also, in fact, you call fourth ranking, you know, the daughter has to bring the husband to live in the father-in-law's house or something like that. So that kind of social organization is still there. That's why the film refers to that once the honey is ready, the son-in-law comes to eat honey at his wife's house, and that's a big ceremonial thing. You know, you can treat the son-in-law as a real distinguished guest. So some of my relatives, field relations, you know, they still treat me like an honored son-in-law in the house. You know, like Professor Hood goes to see his adopted family or his field family. So you go there, you get the best part of the monitor lizard. You get the best first pick of the honey, you know, which after about 15 or 20 days starts fermenting. You know, that honey is really intoxicating. I don't know if our friend came here. No, she hasn't come. We have a student of Dr. Hakimi. Oh, she is here. She yesterday had bought this honey, you know, and I was thinking, oh, should I take it or not? And let it ferment for some time. It's very intoxicating. But anyway.
Just to add one thing, since this is something historical, I thought that, you know, because we were discussing this, the question of isolation or mainstreaming, as you argue, that, you know, ultimately, when you look at the Jarawas, you know, the isolationists have a flawed argument. Because the Jarawas are not isolated. There are settlements running right across the islands north to south. And they, you know, isolation would mean they are in a completely different uninhabited island on their own. They are not there.
Which Sentinelese are?
Only the Sentinelese are. Rest are all surrounded by settlers. And so clearly this argument that you cannot, because these are porous borders, people are going in and you can't regulate or police the entire borders. So that's one, and therefore there has been these kind of acculturation, contact, this, that and the other. So that's why Vishwajit proposed this argument that since they are already getting into contact, acquiring language, acquiring clothing, acquiring their habits of drinking alcohol, tobacco, etc. from the outsider, the best way for them to encounter the outside world is also to empower them in a way that they are aware of their own identity before they become completely dissolved in the outside of the mainstream world. And one more thing as far as the Andaman Islands are concerned, and this is part of a book that Vishwajit and I are working on, is the fact that the Andaman Islanders have acquired a special place in anthropological imagination and also in genetic studies as our human ancestors, as the earliest kind. There's almost a kind of, what should I say, international, global concern that these people need to be preserved. So that the Indian government is under scrutiny all the time. That, you know, you cannot mainstream them. So mainstreaming is a dirty word, although the settlers around don't like the fact that these bunch of 500 people enjoy such a huge sort of area by themselves, they are unproductive labor, and they are enjoying the sort of government attention that we don't. So the government is caught in this dilemma that there is domestic settler pressure that mainstream them, and there is international and global kind of ethical and other concerns that these are our human ancestors and they are our ethnographic and cultural capital in some ways. So therefore there is this thing that the government is not quite ready to take a position.
See, the government has this state idea that if you keep them also away from the rest of the communities, or you keep them in what they would define as isolated and protected, or what was called earlier on as the human zoo, it also brings money to the people. You know?
Tourism.
It brings tourism, it brings money to the welfare organization. So by keeping it provides a salary to a doctor who is supposed to go and look after these things on a regular basis. Never goes. You know, he says, I didn't get the jeep, there was too much of rainfall, the tree fell on the road so I couldn't go there. It provides this basis of having a teacher who is commissioned to do classes and teach them Hindustani but never goes to the school in the tribal. So we created the school system. You know, it's trying to create an alternative, to create a platform where the tribal has a capacity to have a dialogue with the outside world. It is this capacity in letting them talk back to us which is important.
Any questions from bertajuk?
Thank you very much. I find the discourse today highly relevant and somewhat parallel to yesterday's discourse at the University of Sciences Lab. The issues raised have been very good, and basically one of the conclusions that from this seminar, the discourse would be that history is of supreme importance in terms of understanding the process of events happening here, and which raised questions that were raised by both our colleague over there and Ravi. Ravi indeed raised the question, which is highly relevant, which is his number 2 question. Do they have a faith system? Do they have a belief system? Anthropologists would always say yes. Okay.
Theologian may not say yes. Theologian may not say yes.
Theologian would say no. We'll change that by tomorrow. We'll send you a minister to convert.
That's their beliefs.
That's their beliefs.
That was supposed to be my subsequent question.
See,
you know the answer. You know the answer.
Wittgenstein wrote that if a tick who lives on the dog's body has to make a ritual, he would worship the dog.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I recall my supervisor and also saying that as well. Wittgenstein, very famous for things like that. Okay, that's something else. And the engagement question about the genomic and myocardial studies on these people. I encourage a group here which studied that, but they could not actually do the fieldwork. But perhaps you can enlighten us. Any studies of genomic, the genomic situation about people in the Andaman Islands? Has there been a record of that?
Yes, Selfridge's Coalis Sulfresa, who started the genome mapping, has already mapped it, including the JARAWAs and the OBs. They have genetic mapping done for them. Then in India also there is a central Indian Council for
Tangaraj is the person
Indian Council of Medical Research. He has also done some work on the genetic studies and mapping it out. ICMR. And the other person who started the genome mapping project is Coalis, Sulfresa Coalis. Is it Harvard? Or was it Harvard? Actually, on Google, if you do genetic studies on the JARAWAs, there are a lot of work which has been done there. Even Anthropological Survey of India has done some work, and they have tried to correlate it to the linguistic mappings in the subcontinent. So, they say the Austro-Asiatic, Mundari-speaking groups which are found in central India have genetic affinity to JARAWAs.
Actually, the Anthropological Survey of India is an interesting institution. It has been devoted very largely to physical anthropology from its very start. So they have been interested in genetics as well. So that has been, but they have been largely indifferent to cultural and social anthropology. In India, the government or the state-driven anthropological institution is still focused on sort of race. You know, if one could say, in a politically incorrect term, is race. I mean, it's the racial characteristic.
For them, culture doesn't exist.
Or culture
that also is a government politics. A state-run anthropology, which has race, sustains this idea that government is very mighty, that I have saved all the races. We have giraffes, we have rhinoceros, we have hippopotamus. And if you think of the history of the zoo, it's a Victorian European idea to have a botanical garden, to have a zoological garden. And so is the constitution created this anthropological survey, linguistic survey of India, who do, is your phonological system identical to some tribal language, Gondi language or something, Tulu language, etc. But it's a very archaic way of looking at it. Today, nobody does that because there are some great Andamanis who live in the middle of the islands who are married to Malayalis, who are married to Bengalis, and their children claim to have a status of PBTG. And the government administration always tells me, I said, Dr. Saab, should we give them money or not? So I said, well, you should stop giving them dole. They are all having jobs now. Why should they be classified as PBTG? But the husband who belongs to, say, Tamil origin will not take the tribal wife to live with him in the mother's house. He wants to live in the reserved territory because then he has free ration, free land, free access.
First question, what's your name again? PhD student?
My name is Mohammed Paratal.
Yeah. Our people who look like the JARAWAs, they are called negritos here. Right? You're talking about the African resemblance. Yeah, so that goes further, little Negroes. Yeah, that's what.
Yes.
There was also this term Asiatic negritos.
Oriental first and then Asiatic. If you see the colonial records, they would say Oriental negritos.
What's the difference there?
No, the Orient was this vast space which is not Occident. So it's just, and then Asia becomes a sort of more cartographically, this is Asia. I don't know them so well, so whether they figure it within the negritos.
We have a question from Fang.
Good morning, Prof. Thank you for the inspiring stories, sharing sessions of the JARAWA community in Andaman Island. From the video, I realized there's one of the children are using a ICT tools, handphone. Could you further enlighten us on the ICT penetration of the communities and how far does the ICT adoptions of the community in their daily life? Okay, and then the second question is, it is a very ingenious idea or ingenious move in exposing the JARAWA tribe in two worlds, which is the both forest and outside world. So in this context, are we going to move them towards accept the reality of modernity? And how should we go about balancing the mainstream community to balance the ecosystem for the indigenous community? Thank you.
That's a thesis, not a question. Did you say ICT? No, I took my bloody computer to show them the old films and the films which are being made on them. We have now got some grants to provide 3 laptops and solar pads to run them in the 3 different schools in the forest. You only saw it in one location in the school. But then but as the community moves from place to place, and it's raining always just like Malay, you know, there's no ICT. Also those phones are not really phones. They are dummies, you know. It's like, pardon my saying that, but when say, I've seen in China when somebody passes away in the village, they make these small paper cards, paper cigarette packets, you know, all the things which my grandfather loved, I would give it to him in the coffin. So it's the same thing that automatically brings this kind of fetish to give them some discarded watches, discarded telephone cases, you know, and they sort of pretend as if like it's phone. In fact, I remember the 1982 when I started my research work on these islands. There was this guy who used to be always half days. He was an elder person. He says, "You sit down and write all these things, you know. You should come to my Linto and I'll show you how I write." So he said, "Really?" So he said, "Yeah." So then he wrote something. And I said, "Read it." So he said, "No, I only can read it. You can't read it, you know. So I can't." So everybody wants to imitate. Modernization is a process, I think, which has become an imitational process. Mimicry, you know. It's what's that guy who wrote about the mimesis and Tossing has talked about how mimesis and how people copy and how that becomes a vein. So I think they're very much like that. That's the ICT part. The other part is to deal with this issue of incorporation or mainstreaming them. What this purpose was, I think it didn't come through, or I failed in it, is to communicate that the community should decide how much they want to be part of the mainstream. We didn't show today the segment which I showed yesterday in the other session of discussion, where the community decides that I should have my children and grandchildren who can move in between the 2 worlds. The 2 worlds are already there. That's why that old woman is saying that, you know, honeybees are now useless. You know, they pointed out that, look, there's a honey farm, the bee farm there, and those bees are constantly fighting with our jungle bees, which becomes their metaphor of saying that the settlements are close by and the settlers are fighting with us on the resources. So actually one has to read this discourse on conservation, activism and ecology, not from the perspective of us, but from there, you know, to have a sort of ethno-ecological sensitivity, you know, kind of thing, ethno-ecological studies.
Any questions? Maybe Dr. Srida, expert in sustainable tourism.
My God.
Thank you, Prof, for your presentation. I've got actually two questions. One is a non-tourism question, the other one is a tourism question. The first one, more on the educational context. I think it's very creative where you incorporated the elements of the 3 seasons from the lenses of the community to bring about textbook. Yeah. So, what was the trigger or your motivation behind doing that? And while doing that, how has, from a central government policy context with regards to education, how supportive have they been in this approach? That's my first question. Maybe you can respond to that before my tourism question.
let's begin with the last part, because that's a part which touches my thought. The central government, to be very honest, is not very keen on this. It's not very hot on this, so to say. Because one of the things we are trying to tell to the school, to the children who come and the parents who participate with the children in the school, is to stand up for their rights, and to protect the forest. So they have now created a group of teenagers who catch all the poachers who are illegally in the forest. They are called ANDAMAN. The first reaction which the Lieutenant Governor told me was that, Dr. Pandey, this is a very bad idea of yours. Because the other bureaucrats, junior bureaucrats, went and told the Lieutenant Governor, sir, this is terribly problematic. He's a communist. He's going to create this guerrilla warfare in the forest. I'm sure it relates to part of the Malayan history also in the presence of forces in Orang-Asli forest. And so that the government is very leery about this idea. So they encourage, because it's a new idea, and so when they want to showcase that they're very sensible and sensitive, they will showcase it. But otherwise, I'm not allowed to put this film out in public. I'm supposed to, restrict it. So government is not very supportive, but it's not also disruptive about it, So they are letting it happen. So in some sense, I'm also very thankful that even if they don't fully encourage it, they're not saying don't do it. I don't know if that answers the question. You were going to raise this.
No, you asked the seasons question.
Season. See, everybody moves from place to place in relation to season. So they would not hunt pigs in the turtle hunting season. They will not hunt pigs at the time when they are supposed to collect tubers, because that's the only resource available at that time. There is no pig to be hunted. The pigs are all breeding when the tubers can be cultivated. So in that sense, they have a very clear idea of what work they have to do. And actually, most of the hunter-gatherer societies have what they call as situational leadership. So if you have to make a canoe, there is somebody who is expert in making the canoes, who would organize the whole community to work and do the labor input for it. Similarly, if there is honey gathering season, everybody is involved first to make those honey containers, oohs. So once the oohs are made, then only they can start collecting. So there is a rhythm. If you even ask ourselves, why do we have school? Why does the school have early children or young age kids who go to school? I don't know if this happens here or not, but in India it's very common. They teach them hygiene. You must cut your nails, you must brush your teeth. Then by the time they come to class 6, they are learning physics, chemistry. Because then maths is only successful if the teacher can communicate to the kid that it's related to the day-to-day life. Multiplication tables would be helpful. If you go to the shop to buy a candy, price of one candy is 10 ringgits, then for 10 candies you will have to pay 100 ringgits. So the kid thinks I'm very educated. So we create a miniature world in the school. So the school for the JARAWAs, or school perhaps for any tribal community in that sense, must miniaturize their own worldview as well as the world which is outside. That's why the Western kids have this play section of kitchen, farm. Kids are given tractors and cars, which are miniature. So the world for a child is small, it's miniaturized so that they can operate in a large-scale society. So we took up the season as a way to create the text, so that also the adult in that time who is making the honey container learns from, the kids learn from oh, my grandfather is today making honey container, let me see what tools he uses. So the relationship becomes concrete, so to say. So that's why we selected the principle instead of having class 1 textbook, class 2 textbook. And it keeps repeating, so the younger ones learn from the elder kids. As I saw, the adult kids or teenagers are taking the younger ones into the forest. They're not doing anything. For them it's a great fun, that the big brother is going to show me how to collect them.
It's very wonderful, very creatively done. I think it's probably one way of looking at sustainable or to sustain their cultural knowledge. So that part is very nicely done. The other question is tourism related. I know that coming from a tourism angle, when we speak about indigenous people, native people, there have been discourses that say that they are, I'm not sure if you've heard the term captive tourism. So whereby do you treat the indigenous people like, as you mentioned, the animals in the zoo? So what I would like to know is from two perspectives. One, as an anthropologist, from your perspective, how do you see tourism coming into an indigenous community? And second question would be the perspective of the community themselves. Since you've been with them, how do they view tourism for their own benefit?
I think one of the things that as far as tourism is concerned, there have been different, there are 5 particularly vulnerable tribal groups in the Andaman Islands. Tourist routes do not take them to tourists to all these people. The Jarawas who are on the mainland of the islands are the ones who are most exposed to the possibility of tourist intervention. And they have been at the receiving end of both tourist interest and tourist exploitation. And the government has played a very dubious role in that. Because they know, see, this is one of the other problems with the Jarawa reserve territory is that there's a big sort of large trunk road which connects all the 3 islands, and part of that road cuts through the reserve territory. So anyone, commuters or tourists who want to go from South Andaman to North Andaman, they will go via the Jarawa reserve. Now there are lots of do's and don'ts etc. there, and clearly on paper tourism is not allowed. But settlers who are tour operators, tour guides have found very, very easy source of revenue for illegal human safaris, organizing them through local police, bringing out the Jarawas, offering them biscuits, trinkets, this, and just making a show, a quick selfie, a quick photograph, and then sort of go away. And this has created a very, very difficult situation even among the community itself. And Vishwajit would know that, and he has also done a paper on it, that while the younger people, younger Jarawas, found those interactions with the tourists quite interesting, because they were getting things, a t-shirt, a baseball cap, things, and so they would go outside and preen in front of the cameras. But then Vishwajit actually, he went and he said that this was, if the younger people get so attracted to the idea that they don't know whether it's tourism, but they feel that there is a space where we can go, we can just show ourselves and get things and come away, it's good for us. And then the welfare workers, Vishwajit was trained, or rather he told them that this is something that's dangerous. Please create this idea that photographing you is something that is both going to physically be harmful and psychologically be harmful. The camera, he created the sense that let no one take a picture of you without your consent. And that was constantly drilled into them, and also they were discouraged from going to the road unless there was actually a need for so. So after a great peak of this human safari tourism, which you will find videos also on YouTube, the moment you will see Jarawas dancing this, that and the other, but that has been somewhat limited.
You also spread a word, you told the Jarawas, we're just telling his eye and stuff, that don't let the flash take a picture of you, that flash thing. Because the Jarawas always thinking, all these outsiders take a picture, a lot of lightning happens, and we have to close our eyes. So I said that to the social workers, you tell them that if they're exposed to flash, it's like being exposed to X-ray or something, radioactive substance. And that worked for some time, then they withdrew from being photographed. But then happened, they would say, give us money if you want to photograph, which is happening all over the world, the indigenous people are paid for posing.
And the other sort of, the more disturbing aspect of it was that why were tourists so interested to see them? And unfortunately, the first reason was that the reputation of these people don't wear any clothes. So to see the naked savage, as it were, was the great idea. Once again, through intervention, there was this lot of debate now whether clothing should be given to these people or not. Now, many were accepting clothing, and many, what they used to do is that some of the settlers gave them a t-shirt, they wore it, and when they went inside the jungle, they took it off. So this idea, Vishjit conducted a series of conversations with the community, women and men, that you be in whatever way you want in your forest, but if you're coming towards the road, would it be better for you to wear something? And which they readily agreed. And the moment the JARAWA started wearing clothes, interest in them began to sort of wane. You know how human beings are in many ways. So clearly there was this idea that first interest is not an anthropological interest, it's a voyeuristic interest to see these people in their sort of naked savageness. But now, of course, these things have been restricted but not entirely gone, because, as I said, that settler interest, meaning business, local businesses thrive on this tourism. Apparently there's some limestone cave near the JARAWA reserve, which is not such a great thing. But in the name of taking tourists to the limestone caves, they will stop by near the JARAWA reserve and try to see.
There's a chance of seeing JARAWA. We don't guarantee you, but it's quite possible. But they've got their own schedule, At early morning they cross the roads. On late evening they don't cross the roads.
So from an anthropological perspective, your lens, where do you stand when it comes to tourism or indigenous tourism? Is there a possibility if it is conducted for good benefit to society?
We had a talk with some of the community, not the JARAWA, the Ongis, which are slightly in a different historical point at the moment. They reside in Little Andaman. And in fact, the next talk which I have to give in the University of Wacana is to deal with another island, the southernmost island, and how the government wanted to do tourism, and what was the input of people, the indigenous people, to stall it. So my effort was to stall this kind of tourist efforts, which destroys the environment and ecology, as well as the indigenous people's forest. But anyway, in Little Andaman, there is a potential of developing it. We talk to the community. The community says that we are happy to show what we are. They gave us a very simple example. They said, you drink tea leaves. But we have tukunjumuri. It's a kind of mint which grows in the forest, and they boil it and make it. So I said, we were very happy to share that. And that doesn't cost production of tea. It's not something you have to buy in the market. It's growing all over the forest. So the proposal was given to the government that a small patch on that island should be kept aside for these people to come out and perhaps teach, run it not as tourism, but as a teaching program. Where the tourist goes and cleans part of the seashore or the creeks which are getting stuffed up by the garbage thrown by the industrialized society, but they learn something from the indigenous community. But of course the Indian government says, "Nee, Dr. Saab, this is a very fancy idea. Nobody will come from America to come and clean your garbage." I said, they will, Means Americans go to New Zealand, Professor Wood would substantiate, to go and clean the sheep and, shear the sheep. And they pay prime price for it. So why should we only think that tribal tourism is that they will dance and make baskets and we will give them some money, or the state has a place where there's a restaurant, you can eat some food and see the tribals dancing. But let the tribal teach something, because then he takes a pride in his knowledge. In fact, this film which we made, we have given them the book. So the books are already being used, with the instructor and the computer images, etc. So they were all very excited. Yes, you're going to make this film, this is good. Then we can show it every season, the same film. So now the CD has been left in the school and they will arrange to see it season to season. So I think there's a very clear idea that how much we would let you know and how much we would not let you know about us. How much we would share with the tourist and how much we would not. I think tourist culture, since we're trying to work with this, is very much like a house. I would let you come and sit in my living room, but I won't let you come into my kitchen or my bedroom. So there's a section. It's just like computer. You have security. You can open the files up to this limit, but you can't go to the hard disk. There are a series of these things which have to be understood in a culture. And then I think every culture is quite, takes a pride in saying that yes, I will share something of my culture. I have never experienced any culture which says I will not let you do anything, as long as you go with the right attitude.
Yes, Joe, and then go back.
Good morning, Professor. Thanks a lot for sharing. I was impressed with the points you indicated from the lens of anthropology, and you also get consensus from the community in the context of education to be introduced to the community and so on. I mean, in my opinion, globalization, modernization is exactly like a tsunami. Nobody can run away from that. You give them a small shoes, then you don't expect them to climb the trees very well. You give them a drone, you don't think they can actually fly a kite. This is what I think of it. So based on, I mean, your point of view, for example, just now Dr. did mention about younger generation, they probably feel excited for new things, new ideas to be introduced by the outsiders. What if there's a difference, what you call that, point of view or maybe disagreement in terms of, for example, certain, some modernization, for example, ICTs and so on. For example, the elder generations, they believe that this kind of new things is actually spoiling our cultures, identity and so on. But the younger generation actually probably, they can adapt very well and they're willing to adapt to new things. So when this happens, so actually what is our stand? I mean, should we proceed with the empowerment, we so-called empowerment and also development programs? So actually, what should we do, I mean, on that?
What should we do? I think the first thing is to rephrase the issue by saying we should ask them, in quotation marks, what they would like to do. The assumption that younger people like to do new things also makes the younger people in a very bad position within the society. What people call sociologically, there are generational gaps. There are tensions in the family, So how do you, what I learned from the JARAWAs is that they want their kids to operate in the forest as well as in the outside world. Let them select what they want, If they want to wear clothes, let them wear it. Don't say don't wear clothes. So in fact, we, taking up this example, we encourage them to wear clothes. Certain kind of dress was even provided by the state. But we said you just don't take it as a door, as something which is given free to you. But you bring some of those honey baskets which you have made, you deposit that honey basket with the local official, that local gram, and in return you take clothes. So what happens, the tradition of making that handicraft is there, and that handicraft is being sold for the tourist, through a tourist outlet, the government. So there's a way in which perhaps things can be gentle. I always think these words, colonialism, globalization and modernization, they sound as if like it is some invasion, conquest, and the attack of some cultural, something which is going to be threatened. They sound like a big gamelan music, which is going to hurt your ears at some point of it. So the gentle process is much better. And I think in that sense, perhaps a right for the other person who is going to experience modernity and globalization must be taken into consideration. Their voice cannot be overruled. Look at the languages. Today we use in the globalized age, we talk through we communicate through the smartphones, or we write messages. Half of the time we only have emoticons. And who reads a text with maximum emoticons? Little kids read it with their comic books or something. So what is left out of this? The capacity to express, to write has to be there, and there will be gentle and slow process. So it must be moderated, in other words.
Just one thing, I think that both of us have been sort of in a way arguing with government over this, that when you are thinking of mainstreaming them, it means that you want to give them a standard state kind of education, and as Vishwajit said, you employ them in some government office as some kind of local staff or junior staff. Something which completely is alien to their cultural, their ways of being. So the idea is, can we imagine alternative modes of livelihood, community-driven livelihood, forest-based livelihoods, which sustain them in their own habitat, give them some land rights. They don't have land rights, so the forest can be, the territory can be denotified anytime government wants to expand the road or to build something. So these things need to be negotiated. That, in fact, Vishwajit raised this very difficult question to the government and they didn't have an answer. That, do you imagine them to be kept in reserves forever? How sustainable is a reserve? Is there a life which can be sustained outside and within? How will you? So these are future-based questions, are extremely difficult to, because the government believes that our own position is to keep them alive, not to think beyond. We just want to keep them alive. So I think that they feel that we have, their numbers have grown. There were 420 Jarawas initially. Now their numbers have grown to 500. So the government says, see, look, modern medicine has helped. There will be lesser mortality. The vaccines have been introduced. So we are doing a good job.
Alive and well-fed.
They are well-fed and so on.
Population increases, so we are doing well. See, one of the problems, I think, if I may be permitted to say that, sorry to interject, is that when people in the world talk about aboriginal studies and issues pertaining to tribes and autochthonous people and communities or Bhumiputras in different parts of the world, we talk about sustainability. Sustainability means there's already a situation present. Either you want to transform it or you want to continue with it. But we never think of the future. We as non-tribal communities think of future. You know, I have a grandchild, I must give him something to inherit from my property, so that if he wants to go to Oxford, he can go to Oxford. The tribalists never thought that we think of future, and we never even asked them, what do you want to do, what would you like your son to do day after tomorrow? And therefore, in study of tribal communities, I think this notion of future studies, you know, which is done in the environmental people too, you know, futurology, or chaotics, you know, how do people think about their future? How do we make them a step closer to them realizing? The state always tries to deny that. The state has an idea of democratic process, taking you up to a certain level of development, giving you certain rights. But we never think of what the indigenous people wanted. You know, their future is never to be thought about. For them, they only exist in present and past. And when we talk about their future, we have this dilemma of whether you protect them and keep them in a zoo, or you mainstream them. If you mainstream them, then we have this ethical problem, or you have to kill their identity.
Yes, question please.
Okay, hello, Assalamualaikum. My name is Nurul Fatini from University Malaya. I just piece of opinion. Regarding the Malaysian new government, they want to promote ecotourism and all these things will definitely impact the orang asli and those stuff. So I've been working with the Jahai community for almost 5 years. I was with the Jahai in 2014, and after some time, and then recently, I come back to the community. So after 5 years difference, then we can see that these people, they have started to grow from, you know, from they know less, and then nowadays they get to know more about the development and so on. But what I want to share is, previously, if you go to Royal Bloom, so the houseboat or the boatman will definitely make a stop at one of the islands there. So in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, there is an island called ANDAMAN, if I'm not mistaken. And then after a few years, these people, they become separated and they make another new island. And recently there is another new island. So this is actually the impact of tourism. When the people go there and the tourists, they know nothing. They just go and they want to do charity and they just put all the items there, and then these people itself later, they will start to have conflicts between them. So they will start to separate and all those problems happen there. So to cut short, what I mean is that before we want to implement anything, I mean like we from this social sciences worldview, I mean like we think that, oh, this tourism might bring benefits to the community, might do something good for the economy, but then on the ground, we need to know the worldview or the view of the people itself, what the conflicts behind. From our point of view, there is nothing happen. I mean, like it's good for them and so on. But in reality, it's not. So within 5 years, so they've been changing islands, for already 3 islands, and then now they want to merge it again, and they want to separate again. So there are many conflicts happen. And one more thing is that when we talk about the orang asli, so we see orang asli as a homogeneous community, but then it's actually 18 and it should be 19 or more ethnics in peninsula itself. So each orang asli ethnic has their own worldview, and we always assume that once we implement the orang asli or anything, so we think that we can implement one for all, but then it's not. So we need to do further studies on each orang asli ethnic, understand their worldview, then only we come up with the solution or ideas, recommendation or what. So that's all. Thank you.
So tourism is bad for the indigenous people. Well, there was a comment from you. Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Please, Prof, the Jara people as a community will be interested to know whether they have some form of political system and whether they participate in the general elections in India. In other words, are they captured by India's electoral management body to the extent that they participate in elections? Another question is the issue of their own cultural heritage. Are they patrilineal or matrilineal in terms of their cultural practice? Because these are things we want to know. We had a similar group in Nigeria. In the early 80s, they were discovered in the early 80s, they used to live on top of some hills. They had no contact with any government. They didn't know anything about government. They were just like the Jarawa people. They were naked. They were only as good as primitive communal people. So what the government did was to integrate them, went up there, built schools for them, provided electricity, pipe-borne drinking water, and some of them were able to come down and they were integrated. So in the case of the Jarawa people, the question is whether they have a political institution, or indigenous political institution, and whether they participate in the general elections in India. Thank you very much.
Thank you. They did not participate in general election because no voting booth was made for them. They have not been trained or educated or made aware of the fact that there is a way in which you can vote. And vote for what? Their own political system is based on 2 things. There is a situational leadership. If there is a crisis of certain resources not being found, then there is a leader who knows on the basis of knowledge where to go and look for that resource, right? Or if there is a, say hypothetically there is a breakout of fire, what do we do in that case? Do we just run away or try to save this? Somebody in that situation will take the position of the leader and everybody will follow him. Most of the time, is an elder person, you know. There's a kind of geriatricity in the forms of leadership. The eldest person has a right to say. In fact, that impacts also in the choices of marriages. So the eldest person has the right to first marry the available girl. So say a 60-year-old man has no wife left, and if there's a 18-year-old girl, he would have the preference to marry. The other young boys would just have to remain quiet. So there's a kind of political structure even in the kinship which is reflected, just like your knowledge-based thing or an elderly person is given the right to decide. Consequently, nobody has told them that there's a voting system and this thing, because what do you vote for? Which assembly are they going to send a representative to? There is no assembly seat constituted reserved for them. They are not even classified as a tribe, they are classified as a particularly vulnerable tribal group. So if no political party can go and say there that, you know, my party will take care of you, you vote for me.
Any more questions? Dr. Hakim from Muslim, expert on the Sabah, one of the ethnic group Sabah. Okay. One more question that I would like to.
Dr. Sarjita, somewhat regarding the out of Africa theory, other than only in Peninsula and Andaman, you have one more, Atta or Ati people in the Philippines. So actually, my study is on cultural astronomy, so I studied indigenous astronomy. At first, I started to collect all the name of the constellations for all the ethnics in the Malay archipelago. The first ethnic that I go was to the Jahai people, but then I don't discover any name for the stars. I mean, like the specific name of the constellations, but they have like just a normal name. So what I want to do was actually to connect these Negrito names, I mean like the Andamanese stars constellations name, and also with the Peninsula and also with the Philippines. But then I so far didn't manage to do that. But then for the other Malay, the other Austronesian ethnics, we have seen the pattern on how this knowledge is actually distributed, and we try to relate this to the end of the Pleistocene and the early Holocene, where the massive flood happened around 10,000 years ago, and the Sunda land has gone down the sea, and that's the reason why we all has been separated. So previously we are all connected on the piece of shelf which is the Sunda land, and then after that later on, after 10,000 years ago, so it's all been separated. So that's why we are all like on this islands. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Any final questions? Burning questions? Dr. Nelly from architecture. Yeah, maybe from one question from you. How do you design the indigenous? Whether the structure should be based on their culture or foreign culture?
Before you ask the question, let me give you an interesting architecture insight into this people. The government of India built a model house and showed it to the JARAWAs with electrical bulbs, running water and everything. And they said, would you like to have these in the forest built for you? And we can set up a whole camp, you know, with identical houses. What is the Malay word? Something like a kampo, a Jarawa kampo. And you know what the Jarawa response was, in spite of the fact they like to have clothes and not working this way? No, we don't want to live in an electrified house. Why? Because electricity we have seen on the road, it doesn't let the fireflies come. The fireflies are very important. Why? I have written and published something on it. They say fireflies make possible for the lights to have grates. So for them, the architectural principle of even their own housing is based on actually designing of light, and which is, I believe, the most significant money churning architectural principle is the architecture of light numbers. But they always have this sensibility that you should not have on and off, you know, you should not have black and white, darkness and brightness. There should be grades. Because the forest has grades whereby you can see things always. But your city light in your house is turned on and off. You know, suddenly, when you wanted to see the film, we were all looking for the lights to turn it off. As soon as the film gets on, you turn it on. They don't like that. So anyway, I thought because you're a faculty of architecture, I'm interested, so I mentioned it.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I am from the Faculty of Architecture, but I'm not an architect nor a designer. I'm actually in tourism. But I do understand where you come from. I mean, in terms of your statement. Just to add on to whatever everybody has mentioned, this discourse has been extremely, fulfilling in terms of because we were also on the ground in terms of studying the indigenous people of Sampurna, of the island of Marbol. And just to add on to the statement of what she has mentioned, tourism is like a necessary evil, I would say. We just need to identify the balance between economy, social, and environment. You do one thing and then there is an effect on another. So how then do we balance all these three things to ensure sustainability is always in measure? One of the things that I would like to highlight based on the findings of my study back in 2014 was that we went to Marbol with the notion that people are not interested in tourism activities there because they don't have the skill, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have what it takes to be part of the industry. But little did we know, and we discovered much later, is that they chose to remain out of the system because it then collides with their belief system. So that was one of the emerging themes that emerged from the study. So for instance, we asked them, why are you not in tourism activities? You know, you have an additional income to whatever that you're going to earn. They said no, because the tourists then, they wear bikinis, they bring in alcohol. So we want to abstain totally from that because that's something against our Muslim beliefs, our Islamic beliefs. So that was something which they themselves set, and tourism did not interfere with that in any way. Yeah, thank you.
Just inspired to say one thing as far as tourism is concerned, because we all are in some ways interested or rather worried by it. That tourism is that, as you said, necessary evil. Andaman Islands produces nothing, right? It has to be made economically self-sustainable because every supply comes from the mainland. So the government wants to make it economically viable. The earlier idea when Vishwajit started talking about tourism was that the government wanted very sort of low volume tourism, high-end, expensive tourism, so that spaces are sustained and you still generate revenue. But after subsequent government changes, Andaman Islands has become a place for mass tourism. Okay, government itself cheap tourism, which has had a very devastating impact. And also the fact that there is no concern at all left for what kind of implications these are having. So clearly the notion of tourism in a place in Andaman Islands, as Professor began by saying, also has strategic importance for India. So on the one hand you have your military considerations, on the other hand you have your issues of sustaining some kind of sustainable source of revenue. If it is a strategic zone, you cannot have everything a tourist area has. But they don't have any templates. Their templates is, as Vishy said, we'll make Singapore over here, we'll make Hawaii over here, this, that and the other. The task at hand is to see, are there alternative ways to imagine this place? Otherwise, there is no way out of this tourist trap, as it were. That you will get sucked into it because you want quick solutions. So that is one of the problems that there is. And as I said, these communities are very small in number. People are just not bothered about them. There's a 5 lakh settler community against a few thousand, not even a few thousand. Together the PPTGs are what? 1,500 or something. 1,500 people, I mean, do they really matter? You know, that kind of argument is there. Orang Aslis are possibly in a much better state given their numbers.
Prof, last question for me, from okay, Prof, I just want to ask you, is it the Jarawa people, they want to integrate or they don't want to? Basically, from their point of view.
If I understand your question, Mr. D, no, I don't think they want to be completely part of the outside society, the mainstream society. They want, what an English has always said, to have their cake and eat their cake. You know, which is a real problem. How do you solve that problem? As a policy maker, how do you let people have both the choices? It's like the grandfather said in the film, you know, I was trying to discuss it with President Argument, biculturalism and bilingualism. I want my children to go to the city to pick up medicine, but I also want him to go to the forest and hunt their pig. So I don't think the example I gave her about the liking in the modern housing, they don't want it. Otherwise, by today, since what 2000 they have been out, this 2018. In 18 years, the government machinery could have easily brought them into the mainstream society. They made all efforts, but they don't want to leave the forest.
Okay, I think we have listened a very important discourse and very insightful topic on how does Jarawa group try to integrate and disintegrate and try to maintain their own identity. I think I would like to take this opportunity to report our sincere appreciation to Professor Vishwajit Pandaya and Dr. Madhumita for coming all the way from India to give us a lecture on this very important project and try to help the community so that they'll be able to protect their own identity before they've been exposed to all modernization and whatever word we use, jargon called globalization and so on. I hope that we're able to invite you again to come to UPM, and thank you so much to especially to Professor Dato' Saleh for initiating this project engagement, and also to Dr. Muslan and my team there. Thank you very much. I hand over back to Dr. Jasmine. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Professor Vishwajit for taking the time to share your thoughts with us today. So now I would like to invite our Dean, Professor Dr. Amar Harika Hashim, to present a token of appreciation to our speaker and moderator. I would like to call upon Professor Dr. Vishwajit Pandaya. And next will be our moderator, Associate Professor Singh. All of you would like to join us?